Here on the backside of Fort Myers Beach is one of Florida's most productive and serene estuaries. But Estero Bay could have evolved very differently. A plan was on the table to remove the mangroves and seagrasses along the bay's coastline and replace them with seawalls, paving the way for canals and development. That was more than 50 years ago when a group of Lee County residents had a vision about the future of Estero Bay. Their vision was that submerged lands and the water on top of them belonged to all of us. That moment in time, the 1960s, was pivotal in the environmental movement. In the middle of all that, Lee County residents drove the creation of what would become the first aquatic preserve in Florida. This is the story of 50 years of Estero Bay Aquatic Preserve. Lifelong resident of Lee County, Bill Meller, was a leader in creating that vision for Estero Bay. And you were born here in Lee County?
Born right here in Fort Myers, down on Fowler Street. People ask me where you're from, and I say Fowler Street.
You must have got out on the bay when you were young.
I guess one of my first times down here would be out in 1937. We liked to come here to Estero Bay to spend the weekends. Back then, the water was beautifully clear, and the fish were in here just unlimited. There's just unlimited amount of fish in there.
When you guys started the LCCA, that was in the 50s, right?
Yeah, Lee County Conservation Association, yeah. And that was when we first heard this proposal to come in and turn all of Estero Bay into a city of about 8,000 or 9,000 people. Up until then, there'd been an awful lot of dredging up of bays and that sort of thing. And one of the very worst was Boca Ciega Bay up at St. Petersburg. They just dredged up the entire bay up there and destroyed it. And when all this was proposed, we all realized that could be a disaster. So there was arranged, a whole group met and decided that this was going to be a joint effort. So that was where Lee County Conservation Association was born, out of those meetings there.
At one point, the LCCA had membership numbers greater than 50% of the registered voters in Lee County. That gave them a voice that got local and state representatives listening. Why do you think they all got involved? They knew how important it was to protect the bay?
It created a real stir, and a lot of people brought it to their attention, and they began to realize that if we did not preserve some of this, the estuary areas, the estuary is the factory that manufactures your fish, and you destroy those, and you won't see any more snook or redfish. It'll cut them way down. So,
not everyone was in favor of an aquatic preserve. Private landowners and developers had purchased land with the anticipation of making a large return on their investment. The aquatic preserve would mean that they could not clear the mangroves and establish waterfront property.
We thought we had things pretty much under control until some years, and then all of a sudden we wound up and we found out it wasn't. Simply making the argument on the basis that, gee whiz, a lot of our food comes out of it, good for fishing. We realized it had to go more than that. So several of us, including myself, began to study law.
The legal context goes back over 100 years, with laws changing from requiring landowners to improve their shoreline with filling and bulkheads to laws that place those submerged lands as a public trust.
Well, it wasn't until we could actually sit down and cite law that they took us seriously. We managed to get the aquatic preserve, Estero Bay, declared an aquatic preserve, which was a new thing. And after we got that done, there were other people all around the state. Until today, there are 41 aquatic preserves all around the state now.
So as you guys were fighting that for 8 years, was there moments where you said, we might not make it?
Well, there was always a battle going on, but never at any point did anyone ever feel like they're going to quit and give up.
Did you ever remember thinking when you were fighting this 50 years ago, did you have a sense of what you wanted the bay to look like in 50 years? Is it there?
I wanted to look exactly like it did 50 years ago. That was the point of it.
I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody who's been here as long as you have, but people who've been here 30 years, 40 years, mostly talk about it's not as good as it used to be, rather than it's a lot better than it might have been.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not nearly as good as it was when I was just a little kid, because the waters were so much more beautiful, clear then. It's like the water down at Key West. This was beautiful, clear water. You can see bottom and clear sea bottom in 6 feet of water.
Do you see other leadership emerging? Do you see other people who care the way you do?
Oh yes, I think this, for instance, this Nancy here with her group, Estero Bay Buddies, we are seeing that sort of thing appear in other places too. So I think it will be carried on. But you have to watch it all the time. You know, it's one of those cases where you have to win every battle. You lose one, and you can't reverse it.
It's very important in any case to have a persistence of vision. None of these things happened rapidly. The reason we have Estero Bay protected today, and the reason we have the conservation lands we have, and the reason we have a chance to improve the situation, make it better, is because of persistence of people over decades. And you just have to continue to try to protect that thing which you value the most, which is the quality of life that makes Florida, Florida, and Estero Bay the unique gem that it is for Lee County.
You know, Estero Bay was the first preserve, and it was because of the citizens of Estero Bay that it was even established. And I think once citizens across the state were seeing what Estero Bay was doing, they wanted to preserve the submerged lands that were special to them. And so a special task force was established. They looked across the state. They identified 26 areas that they thought needed additional protections. And that really was the foundation for the network, because it was after those 26 areas were recommended to be established as aquatic preserves that the Aquatic Preserve Act was passed in 1975. And you know, that was the start of the system. And today we have 41 aquatic preserves, 2.2 million acres are being set aside for management, you know, to benefit everybody.
When it was first established, the Estero Bay Aquatic Preserve protected the submerged lands just south of Matanzas Pass to Big Carlos Pass. In the 1980s, our evolving understanding of what was needed to preserve the bay led to an expansion down to Little Hickory Island, bringing the preserve to its present 11,000 acres, all the way south to Bonita Beach Road. The watershed or drainage basin for Estero Bay spans nearly 360 square miles and is fed by 5 major rivers and creeks: Hendry Creek, Mulock Creek, Estero River, Spring Creek, and the Imperial River. Today, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Florida Coastal Office manages the Aquatic Preserve Program. Becky Prado is the Deputy Director. She works with the Aquatic Preserve managers to oversee and maintain the areas.
The aquatic preserves in Southwest Florida have some of the most dedicated staff in the entire state. And anybody who lives in and around Estero Bay is lucky to have the staff that we have in this region. They work tirelessly to benefit this aquatic preserve. So our aquatic preserve managers rely on citizens. They are advocates for our aquatic preserves. They are stewards for our aquatic preserves. They're the people that are boating on the waters, they're fishing on the waters, they're swimming on the waters, and so they're essential to all of our management activities. They help provide volunteers for the shorebird or the rookery monitoring, the seagrass monitoring, the water quality monitoring. They're helping educate the communities on the importance of the preserve. Some of them engage with our nonprofit organizations that they've established to help support the aquatic preserves. In Estero Bay, we have the Bay Buddies, and they help coordinate volunteers to help with cleanup events or with our monitoring. So we couldn't do any of it without the citizens and our volunteers. So 50 years from now, I want the citizens of Florida to be able to enjoy the exact same things that we get to enjoy within our aquatic preserves. I want them to be able to go out and catch fish. I want them to be able just to see the birds and the seagrasses just like we do today, if not even more expanded. I think the sky is the limit when we start looking at the future, and we can just continue to see improvements and continue to use the preserves.
That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Still making a difference today.
I guess so. We still got a bay.
We still got a bay.